Representatives from Mankato and North Mankato met today with local businesses and community leaders to talk about the state of the two cities. Aaron Stuve has more with what's on the mind of city leaders and what the collaboration means for the cities themselves.
Next week, Mankato's city manager Susan Arntz will present her State of the City report to the City Council. The report will cover everything from staffing updates to economic development, with an emphasis on the city's housing status and upcoming projects. Ahead of that report, Arntz and North Mankato City Administrator Kevin McCann presented their reports to local business and community leaders, highlighting ongoing projects in the two towns and dispelling some rumors.
There is no data center coming to North Mankato.
No data center, no Costco, no Texas Roadhouse.
Sometimes people will almost be adversarial, like, oh, I don't know that person, you know, they're a jerk. But when you get to know people, understand them, you can have that dialogue, and maybe it's still uncomfortable conversations, but you're not like so adversarial.
Despite the river separating the cities, the two are interconnected by things like the school district, water treatment, and public transportation. So much collaboration requires a strong relationship, something that both leaders say is a crucial part of the job.
More important than collaboration is just sharing information back and forth, so that, you know, on things that affect Mankato, that we have a good sense of what's happening in North Mankato, and the things happening in North Mankato, we have a good enough sense of what's happening there as well.
Aaron Stuve, KUYC News Now.